It's just gone live.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode on AI and its impact on art. I'm Supriya Bhualka. I'm the founder of Coding and More, and this is our episode on how AI is impacting different disciplines. Today's episode is going to be AI's impact on art, and we have with us here Safinah Ali. She is a doctoral student at MIT Media Lab. She works in the Personal Robots group. Her research is about human-robot interaction. Specifically, she focuses on creative collaborations between children and robots. She is interested in understanding how AI can help people create art. She's also at Facebook AI currently, doing research studying human AI creative interactions. So thank you so much, Safinah, for being with us here today. I know it's almost midnight where you are at. What is the time there right now?
Yeah, it is 1:30, but thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah, so Safinah, I actually wanted to ask you to begin this conversation that how does AI create art? And when we talk about art, are we talking about art like in paintings, music, performing arts? Is there something that you can share with the audience here today?
Yeah. So I think traditionally how we viewed AI is this like intelligent software models, algorithms that are able to learn the world around them. So something that would look at a dog and say that this is a dog. And those were typical learning algorithms that people used to work on, but more recently people started working on generative algorithms, which not only are able to tell between two kinds of things, or able to tell by looking at something or hearing something, but is also able to create a thing. So models that are trained on large data sets to be able to create new synthetic data are called generative models. And that has opened up this whole space of AI being able to create art. And let me share my screen just to go over some things. So can you see my screen? All right.
Yes.
Awesome. So I put together like a really, really short deck just to sort of give an overview of what's happening in AI and art, like, and why I think it's exciting. You may not find that exciting. So yeah, as I said, traditionally, like we viewed AI as something that classifies, something that learns, the ability to tell between an image of a dog and a cat. But now we also have algorithms that are able to generate a cat. So something on the right, that the image that you see on the right is an AI generated cat, which was done by a model that was trained on many, many images of cats and was able to create its own cat. AI can now create a lot of different things. So generating text, generating drawings, generating voices, generating faces of people, making paintings, doing style transfer. So we've all seen apps like what's it called that use one kind of style and transfer it on top of your face, like they would make your face into a painting, or Prisma like apps. Those all use a similar technology. There are also fun apps that you always see popping up on different social media, like this can make you older, this can make you younger, this can make you the different gender version of yourself, or like a baby version of yourself. All of them use a similar technology where they're transferring a style on top of your face. You can also create music. You can co-create music and drawings with AI. So there's a bunch of things that people have been working on. Really interesting. More recently, there was this explosion in the AI art scene with the introduction of Clip, which was a language-based language vision tying model, wherein words are tied to images that are associated with those words. And when people join this Clip model with different generative models, such as GANs, they were able to generate images from text prompts. So let me show you some examples. So the text prompts are written in all of these images, and you feed the machine sentences. So a cityscape at night, or a summer day, or a Studio Ghibli word at night. And it would pick up styles from the words that you put in and generate this image, which is, I would say, pretty good for the text prompts that are put in.
So can I ask you a question here, Safinah? So when the AI is generating images by text prompts, is the data that is learning from images or text, or a combination of the two?
So a combination of the two. So the clip model is learned from many different pairs of text and image. So imagine that it's been given a lot of images that say city and a lot of images that say night. And from these pairs of data, so like city, an image of a city, another image of a city, it has kind of learned what are common aspects in different kinds of cities, like windows is a common thing, or these grids or lights are a common thing. And from this, it has learned what would belong in a city. And then that, when it's tied to a generative model, it creates this unique image. So this image doesn't exist. This is no existing city, but it has aspects of a lot of different images that were fed in with the tag of city. Does
So
that make
it's
sense?
no, absolutely, because see, that's what makes it art. Because when an artist paints a city, that's his perception of a city, right?
Exactly.
His emotion. And now this is the AI's way of generating the art, the way he thinks that a cityscape at night should look at, which is why we define it as art. And yet people say this is not art because it's made by technology. I know that's a question for a later time, but
Mhm.
um, I think that's where we are heading, right? That's why people do say this is art, even though it's made
Yeah.
by technology. But that's cool.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I
Okay.
definitely think there's like an aspect to like what do you call is art, and I know we're gonna get into that also. But yeah, it's a new emerging style. I think especially with this whole tying in of a language model, a lot it's become a lot more accessible. Like a lot of different artists are feeding in different prompts, seeing what generates, changing some parameters. So like, let's say I want to focus more on night, less on city, then what would my image look like? Things like that.
And that's where the data biases come in, right? It's really neat
Exactly.
because if you're fed it with data, which is all night scenes, then,
Mhm.
and but this one had a night word in it. So I guess that's a wrong example. But yeah, I can see that all the learnings of AI do come in with the
Mhm.
biases too.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's a great point. Like one of the places where some of these generative models are used in upsampling images, which is changing low resolution images to high resolution images. And someone tried to do it on faces, and it actually converted a lot of like people of color's faces into very like Caucasian or white looking faces. So that's a good example of when data bias came in because the model was trained on a lot of white people. So algorithmic bias doesn't just exist in classification models, but it's also made its way into generative models. And that's also true of text generation a lot. So, like in text generation, when people put in names that typically belong to, like, let's say a race or a religion, like the text generations were pretty biased. Or, like, if a name was very much like a woman's name, the generated text was a little bit more biased than a
Yeah.
male name.
Yes, so it's actually a lot like our human perceptions, right? Like, today most people think Himal is a woman's name and
Hmm.
they don't think it could be a guy.
Right. And if you were to draw it, then you would also more likely make something like that, something like a woman, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Mhm.
Great. You've also
Um,
done some, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, no, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
What were you gonna
No, I
say?
was just going to ask you whether you'll also be sharing some of the work you're going to be doing.
Yeah, totally. I can loop through this and then show you a few examples of things that I've been working on. So people have also been making animations. Here's an animation someone made when they fed in the model A Starry Night, and you can see that it's in the style of the painting, The Starry Night, but it's generating this like surrealistic, abstract-ish image. I was having some fun and putting in Bollywood prompts and seeing what happens. And the top one is something that I created with Toom. The bottom one was another song that I picked from Bollywood. And you can see that the like images are interesting, like they're somewhat they reflect the concepts, but then they're also like you wouldn't this is not something that you would probably find on a Google search. Like you can tell that these are machine generated and they have like a surreal aspect to them, which I really enjoy also. Like there is this inaccuracy and error that is to be enjoyed in this like sort of like happy accidents when you're making art. You can also do a bunch of different styles. So this is an image that I generated with the same prompt, but with different generative models. So the first one is clip draw, which is like a more stroke generation thing. Then there's VQ GAN, there's big GANs, and different kinds of GANs. GAN basically stands for Generative Adversarial Network, which is like one of the more popular networks used to create these images. There's another cool recent work where someone did where they're animating children's drawings using generative models. So it's also pretty exciting. This use drawing data and convert those into these different jumping, walking animations. Animate faces and paintings. Is an animation of Mona Lisa, another animation of the face in the bottom, all created using just a static image. I mean, obviously Mona Lisa was static and then they animated her. It's an AI generated painting that was sold for 400,000, made the news a lot. There was a lot of debate around who should own this, who should make the profit off of this. But yeah, basically it's like an emerging art scene, pretty exciting new medium of creation.
So may I ask you a question here?
Yeah.
When AI generates art, how does it get the value? I mean, can't it make a replica? Like today, great artists, the artwork is so expensive because you can't have a copy, right? He makes one. But
Yeah.
can the AI make multiple copies?
So there are two aspects here. One is that with a lot of these generative models, what you create once is actually unique because the next time you create it, like it's probably trained on the same data set, but every time it generates something unique because which of the data would it be pulling in that time of training. But then there's also another thing to be said about this is digital. So yes, if I put it up, like anyone can download it, anyone can have the original, so to say, right? Like it's not created on a physical medium. So there's a lot of like debate around how valuable should it be? Like what does owning a digital artwork even mean, right? So like for some people, ownership means you own the rights to it. And for some people, like it's actually owning the physical artwork. So it's like digital artwork when you use Photoshop or like Illustrator to make something, you still sell the original for something, but then once it's up there, anyone can sort of download and use it.
So I also wanted to ask you, when we talk about AI generated art, I found it very interesting that, for the octopus playing ukulele, you had
Mhm.
4 different images by 4 different generative models.
Yeah,
It's almost like different artists, having their own perception of the same word, right? It's
exactly.
almost like every AI model is like a different person. And
Yeah.
even with the same data, they're pulling different data. I
Uh-huh.
mean, there is so much likeness to humans, but the question remains that who is the artist? Who is the creator? Is it the person who's putting in the data? Is it the person
Mhm.
who's making the algorithm?
Right.
Who owns it?
And yeah, it's great that you bring that up. Like that's an ongoing debate. Like there's no, I think, correct answer because there are different humans involved in different parts of the loop. And not just like from writing the algorithm, like even before that, like who collected the data set, right? And where is the data set coming from? Like let's say I'm using a data set of paintings, all classical paintings, then everyone who created every one of those paintings is technically also an owner, right? And so people who created the data set, then people are training the model, then someone who's using the model to make something of their own. There are all these different stages. Right now, like the final artwork is owned by the final person who's making the last thing. And I think this question is also extendable to other forms of artwork, right? Like when I'm making a painting, like the person who made the paints, they also technically do own part of this, right? But then the last person is usually selling this. But I think with AI, the question comes up even more because it's a person who wrote a whole algorithm that you're developing on top of. And I think like ownership policy, like all of this has not been thought out yet, but the artworks are existing already. But right now, the end person owns this. And it's actually brings up like there was this interesting debate by in a zoo, like this isn't an AI question, but there was a zoo where a photographer set up a tripod and a camera, and there was this, I forget what kind of monkey, like I think it was a gorilla or someone, and accidentally like pressed on the button, took a selfie, and the image sold for like millions. And there was this whole debate around who owns this, right? Like the camera company, the monkey, the photographer who set it up. Like eventually they ended up dividing things. But yeah, this debate extends to a lot of context.
Also, I was wondering that when the data set are these paintings by maybe masters, Are there any copyright rules around that?
Yeah. So actually, the training data, like data sets that you're usually training on, like they all have some sort of like royalties attached to it that you can train on. So you can only train on like publicly available data set that you've purchased, or but then a lot of people build on top of models that have been developed by like bigger companies or bigger organizations, and they bought rights to that data.
Okay.
So yeah, there are royalties attached.
We're talking about AI and art, but is there really merit in even going down this path? Why should we even consider combining AI with something which is so creative?
I think AI can be creative. I think machines can be creative. Like I think there's value in viewing them as creative machines and as a creative support. Like I think human creativity is still a huge part of this, right? Like our aesthetics, deciding when to stop training, like deciding what is appealing, right? Like I would create 10 images, I would show you one in deciding what is appealing. I think there's creativity involved in all of this. And I see it as a new medium. Like, I don't think it's like replacing other media of creation. Like, I think painting is still as valuable as it would be. But then this is just like when Photoshop came up, right? It was a new media of creation, of making digital art. And there are a lot of fine artists who would argue that it's not the same, like it doesn't involve the same kind of effort. Like how I see it is a totally different kind of effort. And like it also involves a lot more and new people and people with new skill sets into the art making process. And yeah, I think there's value in going down this process, because I think when you make AI art, like there's an entirety of human art knowledge that is going into it, into your training data set, which is valuable in its own sense.
Yeah, it's almost like an infusion of fresh blood, a fresh way of
Exactly.
looking at things.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know whether the audience completely understands what is the difference between Photoshop, like digital art, versus AI created art. Like in India, I know that there are artists who create art on the computer, which is considered digital. So,
Right.
how would a common person know the difference between digital art and AI generated art?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when you're training on many different data points, like many different images in this case. So like in my case, when I was showing you an image of an octopus, like it was trained on many different images of octopi and generating a new octopus based on that. With digital artworks or with illustration tools, you're doing the whole thing manually, like you're still making and tracing on top of octopus. And I see these as different levels of support. So the support that I'm using over here is the knowledge that this model has of what is common across different octopus images, like they will have tentacles or they will have pores, things like that. But then in, let's say, digital creation tools, depending on the tool that you're using, there are different kinds of support. Like if I want to make a circle, it's going to give me a perfect circle. That's something that maybe drawing by hand did not give me, right? But drawing by hand, if I use a ruler, it's going to give me a different kind of support that will help me make a straight line. So I think depending on whatever medium you use, there are different kinds of supports that come in. And the kind of support that comes in over here is the knowledge of historic data.
So, also, Safinah, I wanted to ask you that, today we have different calibers in the audience that who are watching it and who will watch it later. So, one is the children, right?
Mhm.
Who I think is very important to expose them to the tools available to them. So,
Mhm.
if you could suggest some tools that children with no coding, no AI knowledge can use to tinker around, to use a creativity with technology. Then,
Mhm.
second, we would have maybe artists who do
Mhm.
not have, again, computing knowledge, but who
Mhm.
still want to use a support system to accentuate their art. And third is the
Mhm.
programmers, maybe a few of them who are still here and who want to know how they can, what kind of tools they can use, or I mean, anything that you can share for these three category of people,
Yeah.
for them to have a takeaway from today's talk.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are some more easily accessible models that are out on web tools. So there's a tool called GAN Paint, there's a tool called GAN Lab, and there is a model called Pix to Pix, and a lot of different people have implementations of it. Then these are just like websites that you can go on and play and make some of your art. You can also do for drawings, there's Sketch RNN, and for music, there's a thing called AI Duet. And I know I'm like saying all these things, you don't have to like note it down. What I also did was make a document of things, so I can also send that across for you to link in the end. For people who do program, I think there are people who made a lot of Google Colab notebooks that in which you can like put in these different textual prompts or also train your own models, changing some parameters. I'll also be sending that across. But models that you want to look for are Big GAN, VQ GAN. DALI is a great model that came out right now, where you can use this like combination of text and images.
And, since we are giving people access to tools, are there things that ethical considerations that we should sort of educate them about that, one should be careful when you have the power of using technology?
Yeah, I think when you generate media, it's always great to have a disclaimer about it being machine generated. Because so one of the places where this technology has been used a lot, like generative models have been used a lot, is creating faces and creating like videos of faces. Synthetic generated faces are often referred to as deep fakes. And while it can be done for like entertainment, for fun, sometimes even for accessibility, you can probably guess that it can also be done for like sinister reasons, like trying to impersonate someone or trying to spread fake news. Even generating text can be like used to spread any amount of fake news, right? So I think one must always be careful, like when you're generating something, like think a little bit about if I'm going to put it out on the web, how will it be perceived, especially by someone like who doesn't know that things like these exist. So like there have been fake videos made of like politicians or like famous people, which when they first went live, like a lot of people believed it. A lot of people thought that this is a real video, not a generated video. So always like think about what, like if you're creating something that's like fully artistic, just like a visual, like the examples that I showed, that's fine. But let's say you're creating the image of someone or like animating a person in some way, then maybe think about how it'll be perceived. And then there's also these are big AI models, so there's a huge environmental impact associated with training these models, and that there's a lot of like emission that they let out. So there's also something that we thought about, like the cost benefit analysis, like how much is it costing the environment? Should I be doing this? And then finally, also thinking about ownership. So like, let's say you want to make it commercial, like a lot of people really got into NFT art space, like selling these paintings online. So like thinking about who should be making money out of this. I think these are the like ethical considerations that I think about. There must be more.
No, no, of course. And it's a growing field. So I think even with no common policy from the government and there's so much going. So I guess we always have to think of the repercussions, something that starts off as fun and just sharing with, classmates can turn into something not so nice. Safina, I was wondering if we have time for a few questions from the audience. Sure. I don't know. Actually, I've not been following my YouTube. I'm just checking whether we have any questions coming up. Ishita, do we have any questions that the audience has asked? And is there something that you feel that, Safina, we should leave if there are no questions from the audience? Is there something that you feel that we should cover?
I think we got through most things. I think one of the things that like I wanted to sort of delve into was thinking of AI generally and AI art plus art specifically as a very multidisciplinary space. Like it's not just machine learning people, it's not just AI experts who are doing this right now. Like artists are getting involved, educators like you are getting involved, ethicists are getting involved, people from humanities are getting involved. So it can, like, depending on whatever your interest is, you can still get involved with AI. Like AI and technology in general just affects so many of our different aspects of life. So, like for instance, I did not start as a computer science person. Like I said, my major was in design when I was an undergrad, and then eventually I did more computer science and I was in a robotics lab, and then I was still interested in creativity. So I wanted to bring in creativity with robotics work. So a lot of what I work on right now is children collaborating with robots to create artwork. So I think like regardless of your interest, I think AI is a great space to explore.
Yeah, and I guess that we should also leave the audience with the fact that you don't have to be a STEM person, you don't have to be a math person, and it's important to understand AI conceptually so that you can apply it in so many different fields. There's one question that has come up: are there any famous AI artists today, and where can we see their work?
Yeah, actually, there are a bunch. If you are on Twitter, there's a person who goes by the Twitter handle adverb, and they make it post a lot of AI art. So I think your channel can also repost them. There's an Indian artist called Harshit Agarwal and another person called Fabin Rashid, who do a lot of AI art and post it on social also. And I think if you just like look up the hashtag AI art on like these, I know that a bunch of it exists on Twitter. There's a bunch on Instagram, and there's some on TikTok. I know TikTok's not in India right now, but like there are ways to get around. But yeah, if you can explore those, I think those are really cool.
Tell me, Safina, children who have gone, to university, to like college, like RISD and
Mhm.
the Chicago School of Art, or, you know, even in Italy, are they incorporating technology now as part of the curriculum? Do you feel that the shift is happening?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, generative modeling and generative art existed even before AI. Like, and by that I mean not just digital art, but then people were doing things with Grasshopper. People were doing parametric art. Architects, especially people moved from architecture to design, were doing things around making parameters generative. So yeah, it has existed for a while, especially in, like you mentioned, Italy, especially in Europe, design schools, and there are a bunch of like designers, artists who are also pulling in AI into their art right now.
Okay. And I mean, I have so many more questions for you, but I know that we are running short of time. But the other question is, if somebody wants to start their learning today, I guess the first step would be to, once we share the links, to go through them. Two, I was just thinking, when you talk about style transfers, it's not just art, right? There are so many business applications to it,
Hmm.
right? Like, today when you want to try makeup, or you want to try whether certain outfit works on you, is
Mhm.
that also part of the whole GANs, where the styles transfer to before you go for a makeover? I mean, just, do you think there's an
Yeah,
aspect?
definitely. So I know that, like you mentioned, makeup, which was an interesting one where people have been doing that even in pre-GAN times. Like people have been using just your like facial features and then like changing colors. In fact, like Zoom has filters right now where you can like change your lip color, eye color, things like that. Those you don't even use generative models, they just like overlay. But more recently, people have started doing style transfer around. I saw an app around hairstyles, and then they would recommend you like different hair salons. So like businesses have started to pick it up. I think especially the upsampling application that I spoke about, like converting low res images to high resolution images, I think that has been picked up by businesses. I know that it's been used in healthcare, like healthcare imaging, making scans high resolution. It's definitely used in robotics a lot. But yeah, I'm not aware of more business applications. I know there are some musicians playing around with how they can pair with generative music, or like they make a note, the generative model makes a note, and they go back and forth.
Yeah, that's cool. And also, I guess, like when you look at GAN Paint, which was with architecture, I guess it would be a nice tool for architects or interior
Mhm.
designers to have, right? Uh,
Yeah.
you, I mean, just occurred to me that even interior designers, if they're trying to figure out what would be the best way of doing layouts and stuff,
Mhm.
that would also come under this purview.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, like, as I said, architects have already been using generative models, like not AI driven, but have been using generative models before. And I do think that this would be a great application, especially in like giving you ideas and then having a human in the loop where you can iterate on that idea.
Great. No, this has really been very, very useful. I think we are like running short of time. So thank you so much, Safina, for being here. It's really been a very, very informative session. So I
Mhm.
guess the real takeaway has been that yes, one should learn technology. You can apply it in different fields. with art, there are questions to be answered as to who owns the art. But if you're mindful and responsible, and I guess it's very important to have fun with it, right?
Yeah.
And not be scared. And it's a collaborative field, and not feel threatened that, if AI starts generating art, that it is the death of the artist. That's not, it's a collaboration. So I guess, is there any ending note that you would like to leave the audience with, since you have made a trajectory from design to technology and made a beautiful sort of blend with it?
Yeah, I think like I actually call it not a trajectory from design to tech, but like I still do design. So I think like regardless of where you're at, like whatever you're passionate about, you can still bring that into your work. So I think there's no, like, people view disciplines as very like concrete brackets, but not really. Like the more you mix disciplines, the better it is. And I think like being like a jack of all trades, usually looked down upon, but I think it's a great thing if you can mix multiple disciplines.
Yeah, because then you see the common thread amongst all of them.
Exactly. Mhm.
Yeah. So great. Thank you so much again, Safina. I know that now it's 2 o'clock your time. So I
Yeah.
better let
Thank
you
you.
get
This
go
has
back to
been
sleep.
lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for watching us. And we'll be sharing all the resources with you also soon. And if anybody has any further questions on how they can begin or further their learning, you all can always ping us, and I will ask Safina whether I can reach out again to her if kids in the audience want to learn something. So we can keep the conversation going in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Feel free to reach out. Like you can easily find my contact if you Google. But yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to help anyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.